Southwich. Don't ever doubt this.
Life isn't about finding fulfillment and success. It's about creating it. And my next guest has an amazing story to tell, as well as some super successful experiences he's had in his past as a fellow creative. Welcome to the show, Chase Jarvis. What's going on, my man?
Thanks for hosting. I really appreciate it, man.
Dude, I had to hunt you down. I had to chase you down, man. There's a busy guy here.
I wish it wasn't. I wish I could say yes to everything all the time because that's my personality. But the reality is that we got to work in this whole time space continuum, you know?
It is what it is, man. Dude, so I totally appreciate you taking the time out today. I know you're going to be with Seth Godin tomorrow in my neck of the woods, which is pretty cool. So real quick, for those folks who do not know Chase Jarvis, I need a quick little snapshot from my audience, and then we'll dive in.
Sure. I am a person who I guess spent the first half of my life doing everything that everybody else wanted me to do, to pursuing their dreams for my one precious life. And those were people who care deeply about me. But at the end of the day, I realized that the thing that I wanted to do with my life, who I wanted to be, what I wanted to become, where I wanted to go, was different than what everyone else had prescribed. And it was it shouldn't be this difficult, but it was the hardest and arguably most courageous thing I've ever done, is decide to be the person that I want to be unapologetically. Yeah. So I dropped out of a career in medicine. I bailed on a PhD in philosophy. I bailed on a career in professional soccer to become a photographer, which, you know, you can just think how culturally it was hardcore for my parents to recognize that. Mm-hmm. But like most things that we understand about life but are reluctant to pursue, when you do find the thing that you're supposed to be doing with your life and you apply yourself in that world, everything accelerates. The world starts happening for you rather than to you. And so I was able to become a very successful photographer, one of the top commercial photographers in the world, shooting campaigns for Apple and Nike and Samsung and the Fortune 100 brands. And in the process of building that career, I also built a large social following, which allowed me to launch a couple of interesting companies. One was the first ever photo app that shared images to social networks that kicked off the global photo sharing craze. And then a second one was a company called Creative Live, which is today the world's largest learning platforms for creators and entrepreneurs, with 10 million people plus on the platform. And we reach every country on the planet every month. And I just wrote a new book called Creative Calling, which is about my journey and, incidentally, the journey of the world's top creators and entrepreneurs, people like Richard Branson, Brene Brown, Tim Ferriss, Arianna Huffington. And it just so happens that there's a pattern to people who happen to find success, because it's not about finding it, it's not about happening, it's all created, it's very intentional. And these are things we're not told in popular culture. So my story reveals that, and I deconstruct the lives of many of my friends and peers who are the world's top performers. It just so happens that it's available to anyone.
I love it, dude. I love it. You know, it's funny. I was going to be a cop when I was going to be a cop, and then I went to college. My father was like, you know, it's probably not a safe career for you. So let's go to college. Let's do your 4 years over there, and let's see what happens out of school. And so very similar sort of story. I spent 8 years at a local hospital working just menial jobs inside the hospital, you know, as a insurance registrar, you know, just checking insurances, make sure people, you know, had it before they went in for surgery, just like menial tasks. And finally I woke up, I got bit by the creative bug myself. So 13 years ago, I was a special events director for sudden infant death syndrome. So I had to create these events to raise money for SIDS. And then we were able to spend that money to help the families in New Jersey sort of support each other. And when I got bit by that graphic design bug, it was all over. It was and I'm going all in.
Well, there's a couple things here. One, there's creativity. Like we're connecting around our passion for yours as design, for example. Mine is photography and entrepreneurship, building businesses. But it's important to I think take a step back and realize that we're also connecting on a different level, which is creativity with the capital C. And we're talking, these are, you know, ostensibly very obviously creative pursuits, but the point of my book and the point of, I think, the lives of so many of the people that we look up to is this: it's all creative. Creativity doesn't actually equal art. Art is a subset of creativity, and we're all creating every day of our lives. We're creating every moment. You and I are co-creating this conversation right here. And so if we can think of ourselves, if everyone can think of themselves as creative, as it's the superpower of the human being, we can start to take control over our lives and have agency. And whether it's pursuing a particular passion or pursuing a career, when you realize that you are in charge and you can drive and create the living and the life that you want for yourself, it puts a whole new world, a whole new lens on creativity and how we should think about it as a culture.
Right. So I don't want the audience thinking like creativity is simply being able to draw, being able to design, being able to shoot a camera. No, it's being creative with your life. You know how many people, Chase, I talk to on a daily that say, I'm just not a creative person.
Totally. And I think that's quite literally why I wrote the book, because we need to as a culture reorient what it means to be a creator. And I was the same exact person as so many of those people that you just referenced. Like I'll never forget it. It was my second grade teacher, Miss Kelly. It was the student teacher conference. I overheard her tell my mom that I was a lot better at sports than I was at art. And that was at a time where I was making films. I had a stand-up comedy routine. I loved being creative as a kid, as every single kid does. If you ask any first grade classroom who wants to come to the front of the room and draw me a picture, every single hand goes up.
Mm-hmm.
So this tells us, this is this simple little anecdote, tells us that creativity is inside of every person. And like so many people that you just mentioned, like, I'm not creative. I have come to find out that that was really unintentionally, but that was a really toxic message to get from Miss Kelly, my second grade teacher. And it's a really toxic message to continue to reinforce to ourselves on a daily basis for that some subset of the population. And I'm here to tell you that creativity is not art. Creativity is, like, creativity with the capital C is so much more. It's all of the things that we do that we were just speaking about how to create the living and the life that we want. And when we tell ourselves that we're not creative, what you're reinforcing in your psychology is you don't have the ability to make a living and a life doing what you love, which is really dangerous. And creativity isn't this thing that's bestowed on some people and not others. And it's not drawing and painting, not popsicle sticks and pipe cleaners that you were taught in fourth grade. It is this amazing feature that it's the thing that distinguishes humans from all the other species on the planet, is our ability to literally unfold and create our life that we want.
I got a question for you. Do you believe in coincidence?
I tend not to. I think that that things happen for a reason. If you want to get really metaphysical, like, I believe in a consciousness created reality. I think the science is pretty clear as well that, I made the joke about space-time when we first got on here, but that reality actually needs a perceiver, to speak in sort of technical quantum physics terms, that literally manifesting reality is the mechanism for it coming into being. So if you drill down fundamentally into some of that stuff, no, I'm less about coincidence and more about things happen through intention.
Yeah.
But
no, I'm the same way.
Philosophical.
Yeah, it's the reason why I asked that is because I don't believe in it either. I think every move that we make, every decision that we make, everything that happens to us is definitely for a reason. Even us connecting on this podcast, like, there's 1,000 other people you can connect with to go on their podcast. You choose Henry, like, so those are the things that, like, I appreciate, and I've always appreciated in my entrepreneurial career, because there's so many folks out there that just think that the card that was dealt to them is the card they have to live with. And I have some family members, you were saying before, I
Yeah.
have some family members that always thought of me as this, what was I called? I was called by one of my uncles, a desperado. He called me a desperado.
Cue Western music and like, yeah.
Like who do you think you are, right? And
But see, this is exactly the macro point of the book and of what I have come to know as my mission in life is that how, like, what sort of limiting beliefs do we place on ourselves and do we place on one another? And the main struggle comes from this information comes from people that we love and trust and who believe that they have our best intentions in mind when they say, no, you need to go be a doctor or be a this or be a that, something that's respected. And it sets up a dynamic where we are confused as young people and even as adults. I mean, most of the people that I know that I mentioned in sort of the research that I did with the book, people have been on my podcast on Creative Live. Most of them didn't realize that till much later in life as well. And how much time and energy and opportunity was spurned or wasted because of the shitty advice that we got from our parents and our career counselors and our friends and people who ostensibly have our best interests in mind, but conceptually we don't have a way of understanding it in our culture. And so I'm trying to rewrite the definition of creativity and help people understand that it's the superpower of the human being. And like anything else, it's a muscle. The more you use it, the better you get.
I love that you mentioned that, because that is absolutely so key to understand. If you don't use it, you will lose it. And
For sure. And especially if you're consistently telling yourself that, you will become less creative. And again, creative is not drawing and writing. Creative is the ability to solve profound problems. Every single thing that you see around you, everything. Look around, everything. The phone you're looking at, the coffee table behind you, the picture on the wall, the car that you just got out of, the house that you're in, the technology that's creating the experience that we're having right now. It was all created. It was made. It didn't fall. Like, they call me a founder. Chase is the founder of Creative Live. I didn't find shit. I built it. I created it from the ground up. And the same is true with happiness, is the same is true with literally everything around you. So by saying that you're not a creator, it means that you don't have the ability to bring things into the world to manifest your ideas. And that's a really toxic belief to continue to reinforce.
Yeah, that's a mindset thing that we need to readjust or reset. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was this. So you get into a field of work that is, other than your grandfather having those cameras, right, and you basically inheriting them, right?
Yep.
You really didn't know anything about photography other than that.
Nothing. No, I was as the story goes, to tell the short version, is that as I mentioned, my second grade teacher told me I was a lot better at sports, so I ran to sports. Not because I like this; it's very natural. When we hear these from adults that mean something to us, we want to please people. We're social animals, whether we like it or not. And our mission in life, especially early in life, is genuinely and generally to fit in.
Yeah.
So I ran towards sports, and it served me well. To be crystal clear, like, Ms. Kelly was right. I was a good athlete. I probably was better at soccer than I was at art, or football or track than I was at art. But it definitely caused me to identify as an athlete and disidentify as someone who had creative capacity. And that's really what I'm lamenting. So it wasn't until my grandfather dropped dead on my, I don't know, just before my 22nd birthday, right before my college graduation, literally a week before, and I was given his cameras, and I understood in that moment that I had been curious about photography my whole adult life. I knew I had turned my back on creativity, and I knew that I had creativity inside me, but I just didn't want to own that as an identity.
Yeah.
And come to find out that I was on the other side of the camera as an athlete for, went to college on a soccer scholarship, played on the Olympic development soccer team, and there was always cameras around, and you'd always end up in the paper. And it wasn't that these photographs were about me or my friends. It was that I was obsessed with the fact that this was a moment in time that will never come back again. And so
Mm.
while I was always intrigued, it wasn't until my grandfather dropped dead, which was obviously traumatic and horrible,
Yeah.
but that I realized that why don't I lean into this curiosity that I have? And I through touching a camera again and figuring it out, lo and behold, I tapped into something that was really magical for me, and it became my life for the next 10 or 15 years.
I feel like it was a gift. Like
It was, of course, and
it
yeah,
was
you never can, you can't put it all together in the moment, but it
right.
literally gave me a dream career that I could never. I mean, just think of, I don't expect people to understand how good I had it as a photographer, but imagine like whatever the most romantic vision you can have of being a photographer, traveling all over the world, with amazing clients, going to the 50 to 100 countries on someone else's dime, working with the most talented athletes in the world and
Mm.
celebrities and private planes and all the money you could ever want. Like, I had that 1 in a million career, but it was because I was attuned to the thing that I was supposed to be doing. And so many of us are not coached to follow the thing that we're actually supposed to be doing. We're taught to ignore our intuition. And because my grandfather passed me his cameras, when he died, it was just enough to get me to pause. His death was just enough to get me to pause and do a gut check on my life.
Yeah.
And then part two is like lean into the thing that I had been curious about. And boy, that just created a whole universe of opportunity for me. And this is not about my story. This is a lens that we all have this experience, and we discount it in some way or another, or we write it off, or we don't talk about how we actually understand what it is we're supposed to be doing and why, and what do we care about with doing with this one precious run that we've got at this thing called life. And that's part of what I'm trying to get people to think about.
Oh man, I love it. So let's dive into this career of yours a little bit deeper. I didn't dive too deep into your background because I wanted to
Sure.
leave some conversation here. So
Sure.
you come into this photography world and you go all in. Like,
Well,
it didn't take you long for you to associate and connect with the biggest names in the world, the biggest brands in the world. So talk to me about that experience. I want to get inside Chase's head as much as my audience does. What was going on in your head when you said, that's it, I'm burning the boats, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to do it? What was that conversation like with yourself?
well, it was laden with fear and guilt, and I felt like I had to turn my back on every person in my family and my immediate vicinity who thought I was one thing because of cultural stereotypes and all of the other stuff. And I really was afraid to disappoint the people who'd made bets on me, who in part, paid for some of my graduate school or college. I mean, I was $100,000 in debt with student loans, and
Mm,
I had I had set everyone up in my world to think that I was going to be something that was traditionally seen as successful, a professional athlete or a doctor or a lawyer, and so to become a photographer, and I'm doing air quotes because I think we don't necessarily our jobs aren't our identities, but for all conversational purposes here, we can think of it in terms of those definers. And so it wasn't like, oh my God, this is amazing. It was terrified. I was like, wait a minute. I know this is where my curiosity lies. This is where my interest, my passion, and yet this is very different than what I've led everybody else in my world to believe. And so
mhm.
there was um, both a sense of refusing to betray that 8-year-old self that knew I was creative, and also simultaneously a sense of betraying the people that I had sort of duped into thinking that I did want to become a professional athlete or a doctor or whatever. And so there was ultimately that there's just conflict there. There's confusion, especially as a 20 something. And this is part of the growing up process. So I don't want to think that I had it rougher than anyone else. And to be crystal, like, I was born white and male and in America in the late 70s and in the 70s, early 70s. And to be able to like have this process of trying to understand who I was and what I wanted to do to be the most difficult thing that I had ever done, and to know that there are billions of people who don't actually have access to drinking water,
Yeah.
and to know that there, like, I had basically every gift that you could have, and it was still hard for me. So, well, I think it's fair to both acknowledge all the inequity and say, if this was hard for me, imagine what it would be like for a person of color, a female, to own your shit and decide what it is that you want to do in the face of people who, like, there's no evil puppet master telling you to just go be a drone, but there are all these cultural cues that tell us who to be. And I was very confused and scared, but I was one click more motivated than I was shameful. Just 1 degree more curious about what was possible than laden with fear and guilt. Just 1 click. I don't want to pretend like that I, was Superman,
Right.
but I had just enough either ambition or intuition or gut instinct that this was what I needed to experiment with. And for those of us that haven't found our paths yet, like, I don't want to say that there only is one path, but I do know, and every person who's listening knows, that if you look in your past, there were moments in your life, or seasons or years or a time, even if it's just a moment, that everything felt like it was working. It was happening for you, not to you. You were around people that motivated and inspired you. And I'm just encouraging us to listen to that moment. That's what I did. And as soon as I did, my whole world, it didn't become easy. The work was still hard, but it became what I call in the book effortless hard work, where it's easy to rise to the challenge because you're intrigued and interested. You're driving your own bus maybe for the first time in your life, and it feels, metaphorically, of course, but it feels empowering and uplifting, and that when you've tapped into that, and I don't know if you have or many of the people listening, we've all felt that at one point. It's an unbelievable feeling, and this is the thing that we're not coached. This is always available to us, right? It's literally always available to us. And so I just pulled on that thread, and I wasn't able to see the whole path. I was able to just see enough to take the next step or two, and it led to a career that was full of effortless hard work, and put me on top of my industry. And as someone who's on top of one industry, you get to understand what it's, you'd befriend and connect with other people who are at the tops of their industry, and you start to see that there's this pattern.
Yeah.
That's the way it was for me.
Yeah. What was that pattern, do you think? Like, I'm jumping ahead because I'm like setting you up.
Right?
So,
I get it.
yeah,
I
no.
get it.
So before I get there, my question, because if I skip it, I'm going to kick myself in the ass and say you should have asked it. The question prior to getting to the peak and enjoying that view with all the other successful folks in their leagues, how did you associate and connect with those folks? I know a lot of my audience always asks me, like, how did you connect with Dean Graziosi? How did you connect with Russell? How did you connect with all these pro ball players that you're working with now? How did you create that connection? How did you create that relationship? And it's okay to say, listen, I cold turkey emailed them or whatever the case may be, but like, how did you get those relationships to stick?
I think, to do a little bit of backtracking, the book is arranged, and I say again, the book, Creative Calling, the book I just released, is cut into 4 parts. the four parts, and it's a systemic way of approaching any project or ostensibly your life. And the four parts are IDEA. So the big idea is, one, imagine what's possible for yourself or for your vision that you have of a project, or in this case, your life. Design a strategy to get there. And that is basically, you don't build a house. We just don't walk up and start hammering boards together. You make a plan. Number three is E, which is execute. And that is literally doing the hard work, putting in the 10,000 hours, all the stuff that you know from productivity hacks and all that sort of BS. There's actual work involved. And then the most misunderstood and the final one is A, which stands for amplify. And by amplify, I mean you have to put your message out into the world. That is, what is it that you want to be and become? And that you only really do this through community. So to go very discreetly and directly to the question that you asked, none of these things happen overnight. And how did I, become one of the best commercial photographers in the world? It was from that 10,000 hours of work. How did I end up photographing Serena Williams and Roger Federer and, for Apple and Nike? And that was through years and years of contributing to a community, showing up, not just for myself, but for other people, and putting myself around the people, the ideas, and the opportunities that would lead one to understand where I was going. That would, if you have to understand that that it's not, if you just see Serena Williams on the street and you ask her if you can photograph her, it's not going to happen.
No.
Right. So the more that you participate in the photography industry, the more that you're around other athletes or celebrities, or that your photo agent knows this person, like, you just have to continuously put yourself in a position to win. And that's to again, if you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, how can you spend time with the highest quality people that motivate you and lift you up and help inspire you, as opposed to drain you and are taxing, and when you're doing things you're not supposed to be doing around people that you don't look up to? And like, that's just, those are individual choices. And to me, this idea of community and of investing in community versus, and I mean genuinely, like, all of the relationships I had that I've already mentioned, that Richard Branson is an investor in my company. He's a personal mentor. He's become a friend over the past 10 years. Do you think that happens overnight? No. How do you become friends with anyone? You happen to bump into them, or a friend of yours thinks you guys would be great together and introduces you, and you have a genuine relationship. That's how any of these things happen. And the idea that there are shortcuts is mythological, and I think undermines your ability to actually create those connections. So it's about putting in time and effort. But here's the cool thing. Right now you're going like, wait a minute, well, I'm not friends with those people, or I'm not pursuing my passion, or I'm not living, my highest and best calling in life. You might be 10,000 hours away from that, right? Like, if the famous saying, 10,000 hours is what it takes to master something. And that's true. There's this gap right now, and every person who's listening, every person who's watching right now, there's a gap between where you are and where you want to be. There's a handful for whom it's very, very close. But for most of us, you're like, I want to be a surgeon. I want to be an NBA star. I want to be a monk. And whether it's 100 hours or 10,000 hours or 100 miles or whatever measure, there's a gap. That can be frustrating. And 10,000 hours takes years to master something. But here's the cool thing. It's one decision from where you're sitting right now. One decision. All you have to decide, and that's all I did, was decide that this is a kind of a life that I wanted for myself. And I was willing to put in the time and the energy and take the long view. I think being on a daily basis impatient, and on a year or a decade or a life scale being very patient, that's the key to making all of this stuff work.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm happy that you brought that up, because I was doing some study recently and I bumped into this Asian philosophy. I don't know if it's Chinese or Japanese. I forget, but it's called Kazon. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but
No, I haven't.
Kazon is just simply the philosophy, and this is why they say that the Asian car dealerships always outwork the American car dealerships, is because they believe in Kazon. And Kazon is simply the belief of doing little things incrementally over time to get to where you want to be. So instead of trying to like move the mountain, we just chip away.
And that's I'm a huge believer in habits, and that's, you know, in both the design and the execution part of this book. I'm a huge driver of habits. I think mindset is the base of this pyramid.
Sure.
Habits are the things that get us to our goals, and the goal is the tip of the pyramid. And habits, literally how we spend our time day to day, what we do, that ultimately is the outcome. Because nothing, I think I'm a huge advocate of action over intellect. So many of us want to sit on the couch and find the perfect thing to do next, rather than taking some imperfect action. I mean, Richard Branson started Virgin Airlines because he missed a flight to go see his girlfriend. And he needed to get to his girlfriend. So he literally chartered a plane and went around with a cardboard sign that said, you know, tickets to fill in the blank place in the Caribbean for like $75, and raised enough money to offset his costs from the plane. It's like, I just did that at this little teeny airport here. I bet I could do it on a different scale. So like this idea that everything has to start with scale, or the Japanese or Chinese philosophy you're talking about, or the like the most successful and fulfilled, I think it's really important to continue to connect those things. I'm not just saying successful in the money or the whatever attribute, but the most successful and fulfilled people, they know this. And if you look how they spend their time, it's usually spent reasonably, if not wildly judiciously.
Yes. Okay, so let me get to the last question and then we'll wrap it up. I appreciate your time. So the last question I had was, it may not be the last question, you know, but when you got up to that peak and you're hanging out with all of those very influential and successful people, through the eyes of Chase Jarvis, what was the pattern that you saw to be congruent among them all?
It literally was the system that I based the entire book around, that there was a 4-step process that every person, and sometimes people aren't aware that they're actually doing this. I deconstructed my most successful moments, you know, doing the first photo app, you know, raising $60 million, building Creative Live, something that 10 million people use every day, whatever my successes and my failures, where I lost $1 billion with a B dollars because, you know, Instagram sold before my app did to Facebook, where I lost, you know, basically went $100,000 into debt and had no way of paying for it because I was making $2.26 an hour at the time. Like through my successes and failures and deconstructing what, you know, ultimately are my friends and mentors and peers that I've already mentioned several times and are littered throughout the book, there was a 4-step process for every time success had happened. And it went something like this. You imagined what was possible. I don't care if you're building a company, trying to get into a college, trying to become the person that you want to be. You have to start off with imagining what you want, because if you don't know what you want, you're certainly never going to get there, right? Clearly, like if you don't know where you want to go and you just start walking, like, you know, you're going to get somewhere, but it's very hard to say that you ended up where you wanted to be. So these people at the pinnacle of every industry, by and large, have decided, they've imagined that this is possible, and they've decided to design, this is the second step, a set of behaviors that if they did these behaviors, you'd be able to be more successful, fulfilled, etc. Then they actually did the work. There's no way to get around the work.
Right.
The cool thing is that if you're doing something that you love, the work genuinely and generally feels better. So you have more capacity to do this work. And then they didn't get there alone. They had a community, and they worked with that community all along from day one. They told their friends and peers and mentors and parents what they wanted for themselves. And some cool things happen when you start telling people your dreams, as other people start, you get two classes of people, one who want to shut those dreams down, and it's very obvious and you don't have to be friends with them anymore. And the other people, which is the majority of the world, start to get excited for you, and they want to help you. And moreover, the world starts to help you, right? So there, what was common is that there was this pattern of this idea system that every person basically employed in order to get to wherever they were. And sure, it might be labeled differently, or they might have a different way of expanding on it or expounding what they did and how they did it. But ultimately, it's a replicable system that we all can have access to. And that's why I put it down in a book.
I love it, dude. I love it. Creative Calling is the book. You have to get out there. You could either go to creativecalling.com. You can go to Amazon, wherever the hell Chase wants you to grab this book.
Yeah, wherever books are sold.
Wherever Barnes and Noble, right?
Yeah, and I think, again, there are a couple fundamental principles. One is that every person is creative, and by creative, I don't mean is an artist. I mean, you can create anything. Sure, maybe it's a picture or a business, but ostensibly the life. B, that creativity is a muscle, right? And it's only through using it that you strengthen it.
Yeah.
And therefore, C, or thing 3, is it's in creating and being aware that we're creating on a small daily basis that you realize that you have the agency to create whatever you want in your life. They're both creativity, they're just at a different scale. And those are sort of the 3 pillars of the book. And it didn't become an overnight bestseller on accident. I think it's because it's a replicable system. It's not some pie in the sky thing about, again, popsicle sticks and pipe cleaners and painting.
Right.
It's about how the creativity that we have in our lives every day allows us to do what we want in our life.
I think the biggest takeaway that I want the audience to get from, because you just had incredible insight in this conversation. I mean, I hope people got some of the major nuggets that you dropped. I mean, they're in there. So you have to go back and watch this and rewatch this and re-listen to it once it publishes, because it's all there. What I really want, and Chase and I both as creative, and I think you'll back me on this, is I think what we both want in our hearts for all of you guys that are watching and listening is to create that life that you are wanting to live and not expect it to happen by itself, or you're going to bump into it one day. I think we all have the ability to dream. We all have the ability to create a vision. I was talking to somebody this morning from the UK, and he was in the Forex space, and he wanted to drive a Rolls Royce and fly private and wanted to do all these things. And I was like, okay, but what do you plan on doing for work to make that happen? And that was extremely foggy to him. And I said, here's where we need to work. Yeah, that stuff is all nice, but we need to really focus in on and visualize and crystallize in our minds what needs to be done in order for that to happen. Because
for sure. And just to be clear, if that's your end, like, I don't know anyone who has set out to become rich that both became rich and fulfilled. Richness is a byproduct.
Yes.
Wealth is a byproduct.
Yes.
If it's an end in itself, you're going to be in for a world of hurt. If wealth, and that comes in every form, financial, right, spiritual, emotional, right, physical, if you are wealthy, it is, I don't have any experience other than this of the wealthiest people in the world have that is a byproduct of them taking daily actions that bring them joy.
Yeah.
And you figuring out two things: one, what you're supposed to be doing, and two, how to do that thing, are your most critical. It's the critical path to all of the other stuff that you mentioned.
Yeah. So slow. So my advice would be perhaps to slow down a hair. I'm not saying pump the brakes completely, but slow down and allow yourself to think. Give yourself some time to actually think. Because I think we're just go, 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 go. And we don't take time to think. And then we get ourselves in a pickle and we're like, oh shit, why did we do that? And now we got to backtrack. So just take some time to think. And I think this book is going to help you tremendously. Take some time to think. But on top of that, it's going to give you a step-by-step guide on how to do that. And
yeah, that's the crazy thing, is we're not taught that, right? We're not taught how to do any of this stuff. And the coolest thing out here to me is that all of the questions that you have, the answers are in here. You can, like, we go looking externally, but what you want to do, who you want to be, what you want to become, all those answers are in here. And to me, that this, whether you're talking about slowing down or just finding a little bit of quiet, or this is something that we're not taught to do, that if you can carve out this time, in fact, the only way you can access this is if you do carve out the time to actually be intentional. That is the first step to the success that everyone you look up to, whether it's on the internet or a billionaire's list or a inventor or an entrepreneur or a creator or a fireman or a nurse, anything. It's all like the most successful and fulfilled people have decided that that's what they want to do.
That's it. So,
and you can too.
So make that decision and make it now and go. Because there's no Chase did not get to where he's at today by pussyfooting around and sticking his toe in the water and dabbling. And he was like, this is where I'm going and I'm gone. And
it was hard. It was hard to arrive there.
Yes,
it was
very
of course
tough.
It was hard to, right? But this stuff doesn't grow on trees, right?
No. I remember like when I got into the hospital, I'll wrap this up quickly. When I got out of college, it was right after 9/11. So nobody was hiring. So my uncle had some influence at a local hospital. He says, let me get your resume. I'll throw it in there. Let's see if we can get you in. He gets me in and he's like, you got to work. I'm not going to give you a manager job. You got to work for it. So I busted my ass and I got my master's degree through that hospital. They helped me pay for it. And I worked there 8 years until I finally said, you know what? I feel the vice coming in and I'm getting squeezed out here. Uncle Joe, you're never going to realize or know truly what I am feeling like right now, but I got to go. And I come to find out later on that was taken a little personally. At first, I think he was proud of me after the fact that I took the plunge and I took the leap, just like he did when he was in 10th grade and never looked back. I mean, here's a guy with a 10th grade education as a $200 million construction company to this day. Every road you drove on in New Jersey, he built it. So but I felt horrible when I heard that. I was like,
totally. It's required though. It's required. You're not going to be able to achieve the life of your dreams by making everybody around you happy. That is not your job. And more importantly, it's not your brain is not there to make you happy. It's going to send up all these alarms and whatnot. You have to understand that focus and mindset and all of these things are critical pieces of your pie. And again, that's what I've tried to weave together in Creative Calling, is how all this stuff fits together what the most successful and fulfilled people in the world have done. And it's not just, it's not laying on the ground like bags of money for everyone to walk around and pick up.
No,
there's a series of tools and behaviors that we need to exact in order to fulfill ourselves.
And can you just remind the audience that this is not a selfish act?
No, this is the most selfless act you can do. It's selfish to become selfless. To me, if you're not living the dream, the life of your dreams, the number one regret of the dying, number one, not number 5 or 10 or 16 or in the top 20, number one is that they did not live their own life, and they made choices and lived the life that others wanted them to live. And here they were 1, 10, 50, 80, 100 years later, regretting it.
Yeah.
So you can either take that step now or be laden with regret on your deathbed. And I think it's a pretty obvious choice.
Love it. And I'm going to end this right there. I think that is the perfect place. So Chase, real quick, where can folks buy this book again?
Sure. Go anywhere books are sold. Amazon will have it there in 24 hours for most places on the planet. Go to creativecalling.com. We did some really cool companion classes with Creative Live. If you go to Creative Calling, there's some purchase bonuses there. And I'm just at Chase Jarvis everywhere on the internet. I'm grateful for being on the show. I hope you check out the book. And hey, everything you want is within reach. You just have to know how. That's what I tried to do with the book.
Awesome, dude. Chase, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Pleasure, man. Thank you. I hope you have an awesome week, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Dog for the blind. But as the world turns, I'm wondering why.
I speak from the soul, even if it's never heard. Large percentage of this world don't know the power of a word.